Silver Chair. I'm reading chapter 10, last paragraph of chapter 9. Long, long afterwards, without the slightest warning, an utterly strange voice spoke. They knew at once that it was not the one voice in the whole world for which they had secretly been hoping, the voice of Aslan. It was a dark, flat voice, almost, if you knew what that means, a pitch-black voice. It said, "What make you here, creatures of the overworld?" Chapter 10, Travels Without the Sun. "Who's there?" shouted the three travelers. "I am the warden of the marches of Underland, and with me stand 100 Earthmen in arms," came the reply. "Tell me quickly who you are and what is your errand in the deep realm." "We fell down by accident," said Puddleglum, truthfully enough. "Many fall down and few return to the sunlit land," said the voice. "Make ready now to come with me to the Queen of the Deep Realm." "What does she want with us?" asked Scrub, cautiously. "I do not know," said the voice. "Her will is not to be questioned, but obeyed." While he said these words, there was a noise like a soft explosion, and immediately a cold light, gray with a little blue in it, flooded the cavern. All hope that the speaker had been idly boasting when he spoke of his 100 armed followers died at once. Jill found herself blinking and staring at a dense crowd. They were of all sizes, from little gnomes barely a foot high to stately figures taller than men. All carried three-pronged spears in their hands, and all were dreadfully pale, and all stood still as statues. Apart from that, they were very different. Some had tails and some others did not. Some wore great beards, and others had very round, smooth faces, big as pumpkins. There were long, pointed noses and soft noses, long, soft noses like small trunks, and great blobby noses. Several had single horns in the middle of their forehead, but in one respect they were all alike. Every face in the whole 100 was as sad as a sad face could be. They were so sad that after the first glance, Jill almost forgot to be afraid of them. She felt she would like to cheer them up. "Well," said Puddleglum, rubbing his hands together, "this is just what I needed. If these chaps don't teach me to take a serious view of life, I don't know what will. Look at that fellow with the walrus mustache, that one with the get up," said the leader of the Earthmen. There's nothing else to be done. The three travelers scrambled to their feet and joined hands. One wanted the touch of a friend's hand at a moment like that, and the Earthmen came all around them, patting on large, soft feet. Only some had 10 toes, some 12 toes, others had none. "March," said the warden, and march they did. The cold light came from a large ball on top of a long pole, and the tallest of the gnomes carried this at the head of the procession. By its cheerless rays, they could see that they were in a natural cavern. The walls and roof were knobbed, twisted, and gasped with a thousand fantastic shapes, and the stony floor sloped downwards as they proceeded. It was worse for Jill than the others because she hated dark underground places, and when, as they went on, the cave got lower and narrower, and when, at last, the light bearer stood aside and the gnomes, one by one, stooped down, all except the very smallest ones, they stepped into a dark crack and disappeared. She felt that she could no longer bear it. "I can't go in there. I can't, I won't," she panted. The Earthmen said nothing, but they all lowered their spears and pointed them at her. "Steady, Pole," said Puddleglum. "Those big fellows won't be crawling in there if it didn't get wider later on. There's one thing about this underground work. We shan't get any rain." "Well, you don't understand. I can't," wailed Jill. Think how I felt on the cliff, Pole," said Scrub. "You go first, Puddleglum, and I'll come after her." "That's right," said the Marshwiggle, getting down on his hands and knees. "You keep a grip on my heels, Pole, and Scrub will hold on to yours. Then we'll all be comfortable." "Comfortable," said Jill. But she got down and they crawled in on their elbows. It was a nasty place. You had to go flat on your face for what seemed like half an hour. Though it may really have been only 5 minutes, but it felt hot. Jill thought she was being smothered, but at last a dim light showed ahead. The tunnel grew wider and higher. They came out hot, dirty, and shaken into a cave so large that it scarcely seemed like a cave at all. It was full of a dim, drowsy radiance, and here they had no need of the Earthman's strange lantern. The floor was soft with some kind of moss, and out of this grew many strange shapes, branched and tall like trees, but flabby like mushrooms. They stood too far apart to make a forest. It was more like a park. The light, a greenish gray, seemed to come from both them and from the moss, and it was not strong enough to reach the roof of the cave, which must have been a long way overhead. Across the mild, soft, sleepy place they were now made to march. It was very sad, but with a quiet sort of sadness like soft music. Here they passed dozens of strange creatures, animals lying on the turf, either dead or asleep. Jill could not tell which. These were mostly of a dragoness or bat-like sort. Puddleglum did not know what any of them were. Do they grow here? Scrub asked the warden. He seemed very surprised at being spoken to, but replied, no, they are all beasts which they have found their way down by chasms and caves out of overland into the deep realm. Many come down, but few return to the sunlit lands. It is said that they will all wake at the end of the world. His mouth shut like a box when he had said this. In great silence of that cave, the children felt that they would not dare to speak again. The bare feet of the gnomes padding in the deep moss made no sound. There was no wind, no bird, no sound of water. There was no sound of breathing from the strange beasts. When they had walked for several miles, they came to a wall of rock, and in it a low archway leading into another cavern. It was not, however, so bad as the last entrance, and Jill could go through it without bending her head. It brought them into a smaller cave, long and narrow, about the shape and size of a cathedral, and here, filling almost the whole length of it, lay an enormous man fast asleep. He is far bigger than any of the giants, and his face was not like a giant's, but noble and beautiful. His breast rose and fell gently under the great snowy beard which covered him to the waist. A pure silver light, no one saw where it came from, rested upon him. Who's that? Asked Puddleglum, and he was so long since anyone had spoken that Jill wondered how he had the nerve. That is old Father Time, who once was a king in Overland, said the warden. Now he has sunk down into the deep realm and lies dreaming of all the things that are done in the upper world. Many sink down and few return to the sunlit lands. They say he will wake at the end of the world. And out of that cave they passed into another, and then another, and then another, and so on until Jill lost count. But always they were going downhill, and each cave was lower than the last. So the very thought of the weight and depth of the earth above you was suffocating. At last they came to a place where the warden commanded his surest lantern to be lit again. Then they passed into a cave so wide and dark that they could see nothing of it except that right in the front of them was a strip of pale sand ran down into still water, and there beside a little jetty lay a ship without mast or sail, but with many oars. They were made to go on board and led forward to the bows, where there was a clear space in front of the rowers' benches, and a seat running around the inside the bulwarks. One thing I'd like to know, said Puddleglum, is whether anyone from our world, from up top, has ever done this trip before. Many have taken ship at the pale beaches, replied the warden. And yes, I know, replied Puddleglum. And few return to the sunlit lands. You needn't say it again. You are a chap of one idea, aren't you? The children huddled together on each side of the Puddleglum. They had thought him a wet blanket while he was still above ground, but down here he seemed the only comforting thing they had. Then the pale lantern was hung up amidships, and the earthmen sat to the oars, and the ship began to move. The lantern cast its light only a very short way. Looking ahead, they could see nothing but smooth, dark water, fading into absolute blackness. Oh, whatever will become of us, said Jill despairingly. But don't let your hopes down, your spirits down, Paul, said Marshwiggle. There's one thing you've got to remember. We're back on the right lines. We were to go under the ruined city, and we are under it. We're following the instructions again, following the signs. Presently they were given food, flat, flabby cakes of some sort, which had hardly any taste. After that, they gradually fell asleep. When they awoke, everything was just the same. The gnomes were still rowing, the ship still gliding on ahead, dead blackness ahead. How often they woke and slept, they ate and slept again, none of them could ever remember. And the worst thing about it was that you began to feel as if you'd always lived on that ship. In that darkness, and began to wonder whether sun and blue skies and wind and birds had only been a dream. They had almost given up hoping on being afraid about anything, or being afraid about anything, when at last they saw lights ahead, dreary lights, like that of their own lantern. Then quite suddenly one of those lights came close, and they saw that they were passing another ship. After that they met several ships. Then, staring till their eyes hurt, they saw that some of the lights ahead were shining on what looked like wharves, walls, towers, and moving crowds. But still there was hardly any noise. By Jove, said Scrub, a city. And soon they all saw that he was right. But it was a queer city. The lights were so few and far apart that they could scarcely have done for scattered cottages in our world. So the little bits of the place which you could see by the lights were like glimpses of a great seaport. You could make out in one place a whole crowd of ships unloading or unloading. In another place, bales of stuff in warehouses. In a third, walls and pillars that suggested great palaces or temples. And always, wherever the light fell, endless crowds. Hundreds of Earthmen jostling one another as they padded softly about their business in narrow streets, broad squares or up great flights of stairs. Their continued movement made a sort of soft murmuring noise as the ship drew nearer and nearer, but there was not a song or a shout or a bell or the rattle of a wheel anywhere. The city was as quiet and nearly as dark as the inside of a hill. As the ship brought the shore and marched up into the city, rubbed shoulders with them in the crowded streets and the sad, grotesque faces. But no one showed any interest in the strangers. Every gnome seemed to be as busy as it was sad, although Jill never found out what they were so busy about. But the endless moving of shoving, hurrying, and the soft pad, pad, pad went on. At last they came to what appeared to be a great castle, though few of the windows in it were lighted. Here they were taken in and made to cross a courtyard and to climb many staircases. This brought them in the end to a great murkily lit room, and in one corner of it, oh joy, there was an archway filled with quite a different sort of light, the honest yellowish warm light of such a lamp as humans use. What showed by this light inside the archway was the foot of a staircase which wound upward between walls of stone. The light seemed to come from the top. Two earthmen stood on one side, one on each side of the arch like sentries or footmen. The warden went up to those two and said, as if it were a password, "Many sink down to the underworld." And they answered, "And few return to the sunlit lands," as together as it were a countersign. Then all three put their heads together and talked. At last one of the two gnomes in waiting said, "I tell you the Queen's Grace is gone from hence on her great affair. We had best keep these top dwellers in straight prison till her homecoming. Few return to the sunlit lands." At that moment the conversation was interrupted by what seemed to Jill the most delightful noise in the world. It came from above, from the top of the staircase, and it was a clear, ringing voice, perfectly human voice, the voice of a young man. "What coil are you keeping down there, Mulgutherthum? Mulgutherum?" It shouted, "Overworlders, ha! Bring them up here to me that presently." "Please your highness to remember," began Mulgutherthum, but the voice cut him short. "It pleases my highness principally to be obeyed, O mutterer. Bring them up," it called. Mulgutherthum, whatever, shook his head, motioned to the travelers to follow, and began going up the staircase. At every step the light increased. There were rich tapestries hanging on the walls. The lamplight shone golden through thin curtains as the staircase head. The earthmen parted the curtains and stood aside. The three passed in. They were in a beautiful room, richly tapestried, with a bright fire on a clean hearth, and red wine and cut glass sparkling on the table. A young man with fair hair rose to greet them. He was handsome and looked both bold and kind, though there was something about his face that didn't seem quite right. He was dressed in black and altogether looked a bit like Hamlet. "Welcome, otherworlders," he cried, "but stay a moment, I cry you mercy. I've seen you two fair children and this your strange governor before. Was it not you three that met me by the bridge on the borders of Ettinsmore when I rode there by my lady's side?" "Oh, you were the Black Knight who never spoke," exclaimed Jill. "And was that lady the Queen of Underland?" asked Puddleglum in no very friendly voice. And Scrub, who was thinking the same thing, burst out, "Because if it was, I think she was jolly mean. Send us off to a castle of giants who intended to eat us. What harm had we ever done her, I should like to know?" "How?" said the Black Knight with a frown. "If you were not so young a warrior, boy, you and I must have fought to the death on this quarrel. I can hear no words against my lady's honor. But of you this may be assured, that whatsoever she said to you, she said of a good intent. You do not know her. She's a nosegay of all virtues, as truth, mercy, constancy, gentleness, courage, and the rest. I say what I know. Her kindness to me alone, who can in no way reward her, would make an admirable history. But you shall know and love her hereafter. Meanwhile, what is your errand in the deep lands?" And before Puddleglum could stop her, Jill burst out, "Please, we're trying to find this Prince Rilian, Prince Rilian of Narnia." And then she realized what a frightful risk he had taken. These people might be enemies, but the knight showed no interest. "Rilian? Narnia?" he said carelessly. "Narnia? What land is that? I've never heard the name. It must be 1,000 leagues from these parts of the overworld that I know, but it was a strange fantasy that brought you seeking this. How do you call him? Billion? Trillion? In my lady's realm? Indeed, to my certain knowledge, there is no such man here." He laughed very loudly at this, and Jill thought to herself, "I wonder if is that what's wrong with his face? Is he a bit silly?" We had been told to look for a message on the stones of the city ruinous, and we saw the words, "Under me." The knight laughed even more heartily than before. "You were the more deceived," he said. "Those words meant nothing to your purpose. Had you but asked my lady, she could have given you better counsel. For those words are all that is left of a longer script, which in ancient times she will remember, as she will remember is written express this verse. Though under earth and throneless now I be, yet while I lived all earth was under me." Do you remember they fell into the trench? Jill had fallen into the trench and Scrub went down in with her to the E of under me. So, from which it is plain that some great king of the ancient giants who lies buried there caused this boast to be cut in the stone over his sepulchre. Though the breaking up of some stones and the carrying away of others for new buildings and the filling up of the cuts with rubble has left only two words that can still be read. Is it not the merriest jest in the world that you should have thought they were written to you? This was like cold water down the back to Scrub and Jill, for it seemed to them very likely that the words had nothing to do with their quest at all, and that they had been taken in by mere accident. This is a very important part. "Don't you mind him," said Puddleglum. "There are no accidents. Our guide is Aslan, and he was there when the giant king caused the letters to be cut, and he knew already all things that would come of them, including this. This guide of yours must be a long liver, my friend," said the knight with another of his laughs. Jill began to find him a little irritating. "It seems to me, sir," answered Puddleglum, "that this lady of yours must be long liver too, if she remembers the verse as it was when they first cut it." "Very shrewd, Frog-Face," said the knight, clapping Puddleglum on the shoulder and laughing again. "And you have hit the truth. She is of a divine race, and knows neither age nor death. I am the more thankful to her for all her infinite bounty to such a poor mortal wretch as I. For you must know, sirs, I am a man under most strange afflictions, and none but the Queen's grace would have had patience with me." "Patience," said I, "but it goes far beyond that. She has promised me a great kingdom in Overland, and when I am king, her own most gracious hand in marriage. But the tale is too long for you to hear fasting and standing. Hi there, some of you. Bring wine and uplanders food for my guest. Please you be seated, gentlemen. Little maiden, sit in this chair. You shall hear it all." Chapter 11. So you see one thing there, that the idea that those words were cut, centuries, hundreds and thousands of years, probably thousands upon thousands of years in the past, and the knight, the young man says that had nothing to do with your quest. That was just an accident of fate. And Puddleglum says, "No, there are no accidents. Our guide is Aslan." So you can see that I've seen that in my life 1,000 times. Accidents. I call them G-Wax. What an amazing coincidence. GWAAC. Gee, what an amazing coincidence that happened. And then you say, what are the chances of that happening with men? 0%. With God, 100%. So my life has been dictated by coincidences, accidents. There were actually, go back thousands of years. My family motto, about 1,000 BC. It's based on a story about 1,000 BC. Although the Irish was Ireland was settled about 1,000 BC. So yeah. That motto is almost a quote from Joseph in Egypt when he was going to reveal himself to his brothers about that time. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. My whole life was dictated by God. My whole life was planned out by God. Bad things happen. You sold me into slavery. I was, sold to Ishmaelites. Fell in the pit, back thrown into prison. Et cetera. So, but at one point, God launched him. And that's what happens in our lives. So, all right. Good night. Anybody on? No, nobody on. 3, 2, 1. Good night. Blessings.